Good morning. I invite you to the Budget Committee meeting of October 22nd, 2018. With me at the dais is the Chair of the Transportation and Public Works Committee, Councilmember Kevin Reich, and Councilmember Lisa Goodman. Our first up on our agenda, and we do have a pretty packed agenda today, but we wanted to make sure that we added more space for Public Works because it does comprise so much of our budget. So I'll get right to it and invite Director Hutchison. Welcome. Would this be your second official budget, third official budget?
Madam Chair, this would be my third official budget presentation.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and members of the Budget Committee and council members. I am very pleased to present the Public Works budget proposed for 2019. As the chair said, we have a fair amount of information to get through. Our budget is divided into three components, and the presentation will reflect that. The first piece will be the general background and overview of Public Works. The second piece will be our 4 change items that are being proposed. The third will be a review of our capital budget. And finally, we'll discuss utility rates. Over the last year, we have taken the time to improve our communications materials so that we can better express what it is we do in Public Works. We are a collection of 10 divisions working to ensure both above and below the street our infrastructure is in good working condition for the city of Minneapolis. Our total operating budget is $387 million. $62 million approximately is in general fund, about $250 million within the utility funds, and $70 in internal services. It's with this budget that we ensure that both below the street and above the street, we are keeping the city running. I will talk a little bit about our business lines, the divisions that keep this city running, and also take a moment to recognize the division directors and the deputy with me today who have helped me prepare this budget for presentation and carry out the work of Public Works. So the deputy director and our city engineer and I would say our MVP of our department, Lisa Cerny. If you could please just pretend like they don't know you already and raise your hand. The director of business administration, Brett Jelly. And I also would like to recognize Vicki Stone, who's sitting in the back here. Brett and Vicki together are responsible for keeping track of our very large and complex budget, and they do a fantastic job. Transportation planning and programming, Jenny Hager. Transportation engineering and design, Don Elwood, he's our builder. Traffic and parking, John Werchus. And Mike Kennedy, transportation maintenance and repair. Those 4 together comprise the transportation business line of Public Works. Katrina Kessler, surface water and sewer. Dave Herberholz, solid waste, recycling, and I'm going to add organics to that, even though it's not the title. Glenn Garrett's, drinking water. These 3 comprise the utility business line. I also would like to recognize Al Thunberg, who is our newest division director in fleet and is doing a fantastic job in his role. He's what's called an internal service fund and reports up through director of business administration. So together, this team helps deliver everything below the street and above the street. The next iteration of this is going to have some garbage cans on it for Dave. Any questions about our departmental structure, what we do, how we carry out the work?
I just want to note to my colleagues that we've opened up the speaker management queue, and just because this is such a long presentation, as people do have questions or comments, I might be pausing you at the end of a slide to answer those at that point in time. We've been joined now by council members Fletcher, Bender, Johnson, and Cunningham. Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'll move on to part 2 of the Public Works budget presentation, which is an explanation of our proposed 2019 change items. These 4 change items are $150,000 in ongoing revenue-backed funding and $325,000 in one-time funding. As you know, the city is constructing a new office building. There will be 3 divisions of Public Works that will need to move out of the City of Lakes. In my proposal originally, not only did I include this information that you see before you for modernization and records digitization, but I also included a photograph. And that photograph showed the basement of the City of Lakes building. There are 800 boxes of paper in the basement of the City of Lakes building for Public Works alone. And that's after, led by Jenny and Don, and I think John, that our teams have gone through and scrubbed through and removed some. These are records that need to be digitized before we can move. So with $100,000 in one-time funding, we will be able to scan, make ready, determine which files need to be kept and discarded, make ready those files, physically make them ready, remove staples, get them organized, and scan them for digital storage in preparation for a larger records management system that we would be a part of. This is really important work for us to do this year. It's our last shot to get this, to get ourselves prepared. The reason it's so important isn't only because we're moving, it's also because we feel strongly that we need to improve our business processes, and the first step is making our records digital. Today, if a resident has a question about an assessment charge, they call us, we respond by pulling out a paper file. In our vision, they should be able to see that information through a digital portal. But the first step is making it digital. So this prepares us to not only move, but also make our records more accessible and transparent to the public. Our second proposal is for improved right-of-way inspections. Public Works currently has 7 right-of-way inspectors that ensure that permits are being followed. This is not enough for what we do. And we all feel the effects of a disorganized right-of-way, whether you're walking, bicycling, you're a transit rider, or you're driving. At the same time, because of legislation and also because of just a general uptick in business, we have allowed and issued permits for an exponential increase in the number of small cell devices on the city's poles. These permits will help fund an improvement to how we manage the right-of-way. Now, a lot of that will have to do with making sure that the small cell devices are installed as they should be. But it will also help us expand our reach in the right-of-way so that we can maintain a more organized system. We get a little bit of a twofer in this one, because not only are we going to manage day-to-day better, but we now have an extra resource. We would have an extra resource to help carry out the pilot program to inspect snow on sidewalks. This will assist our ability to expand that reach as well, to be able to proactively inspect for snow on sidewalks. This is our only this is our only ongoing ask among our 4 requests for 2019. $100,000 of it is just straight up necessary to pay an electric bill, and the remaining $50,000 would go towards staffing.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher has a question or comment.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. My constituents are definitely feeling the right-of-way issues from all the different things that we have going on in our city, from construction projects to street improvements. And I guess I'm wondering how many people are currently doing this work? If we're adding one position, does that represent, is it like 2 people and now we're going to have 3 people, or is it like 100 people and we're doing a 1% increase? I just don't understand the scale of what we're currently doing for inspections from right away.
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Fletcher, we currently have 7. This makes 8.
Great. So that's a difference in staffing level that people will feel in terms of our ability to do these inspections.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, 8 is better than 7. Our third request for 2019 is for some gap funding. I believe that a few of you have had the opportunity to meet Danielle Elkins. The rest of you will be meeting her. She has just started 2 weeks ago as the city's Urban Transportation Innovation Fellow. Last year, we, through our work with Transportation for America and the Smart Cities Collaborative, realized that we're slipping behind where we need to be thinking about the future of mobility. And there are numerous external pressures, and if you simply consider how Uber and Lyft have changed the landscape, and if you simply consider the time that we have all taken on the scooter issues, we have a strong need to think ahead. We approached, with Transportation for America, we approached the McKnight Foundation for funding, and we have a fellow fully funded for a year through McKnight, and we're very excited about this, and we're very excited about the work. But my vision was a 2-year fellow, because you can do a lot more in 2 years with that kind of momentum than you can in 1. And I fully intend to request additional funding in the 2020 budget. However, that leaves a gap because the McKnight funding ends in October. So this request is for $25,000 in gap funding to be sure that we can continue this work for as long as we need to from October to December, and advance notice, there will be another request for 2020 to continue the work. Our last request for 2019 is for winter maintenance funding. Additional funds are needed to keep pace with the 5-year moving average. Snow is very difficult to predict. So instead of going year by year looking at what we needed last year, assuming that's what we need this year, we take an average of 5 years of the snowfall, the resources we needed, the labor we needed, and we try to match our budget to that. We had several light years of snow, followed by a very heavy year of snow. And our budget has slipped behind that 5-year average. So in order to keep pace with the materials that we need, primarily the materials, also labor, we have requested a $200,000 increase. That's a one-time expense for this year. I'll pause here for questions, Madam Chair, before we move into the capital budget.
Thank you. We have a question or comment from Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director Hutchinson. I wanted to check in. You had talked briefly on this with changing transportation. So I wanted to see what is there any sort of work that's going to be happening around better regulation of the use of the public right-of-way for private businesses? For example, with the scooters and dockless bikes, those are essentially private businesses using our public right-of-way at no cost. And so I'm just curious as to looking forward to next year, will there be conversations about that? Is that something we should be considering now budgetarily? About because I know that other cities are doing some work around regulation of that. So I just wanted to hear from you looking to next year, and should we be taking that into consideration budgetarily now?
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Cunningham, it's an excellent question. I'll answer it in a few different ways. The Transportation Innovation Fellow will definitely be looking at this as part of the work, and it supplements, it augments work that is being done by Josh Johnson, who has been detailed into this role so that we can try to manage it as best we can. And Josh is with John Warch's group in traffic and parking. I'll separate out scooters and bikes because they're a little bit different. And bikes, somewhat easier explanation because we have a contract with Nice Ride. And within that contract, it is outlined how they operate. And they actually, we do regulate it by requiring them to obtain permits for where their virtual station, their docked stations and future virtual stations will be located. We attempt to cover our costs, not necessarily to make money. The scooters, we did this very quickly. We were partway through developing a new ordinance to try and get ahead of it. It is sort of the MO of the companies to come in either before or as you're doing that, and they did. But we were able to have a pair of regulating forces. One is the ordinance, which says you have to have a license agreement. And then we actually do have a regulating license agreement with each company that is using our right-of-way. I don't think we've got it perfect. I think we have an interesting pilot that needs evaluation, and we will be doing that evaluation November 30th. What did we say? November 30th, I think, is when the current pilot ends. The scooters will come up. They will leave the right-of-way. We will evaluate. We do cover our costs. One company has offered $1 per scooter to assist with infrastructure. But I think I know that we're going to be taking a hard look at how the pilot went and what more or different we would like to do as we're coming around to next spring and when they'll come back again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the queue, so let's go ahead into the capital program.
So this next section of the presentation will cover the capital budget for public works, which is 72% of the city's capital budget. So pretty significant. And in this section, I'm going to cover both transportation and utilities. We're not ready to talk about projects until we first talk about the principles by which we select projects. There is a 6 to 9 month process that we go through that will be starting soon for next year, where our team looks at projects based on racial and economic equity, on maintaining a state of good repair, on projects that reflect the data that we collect, the right fix at the right time, creating and seizing opportunities, and advancing complete streets in Vision Zero. So each subsequent category of projects that I talk about have been looked at through these lenses, and perhaps not every single project meets every one, but I'll try to point out which projects and programs, I should say, best reflect these principles of capital project development. There's a large funnel of information that comes to us. We have data on asset condition. We have information about where our racially concentrated areas of poverty exist in the city. We have historical data and trends. We have 311 and direct resident comments that come through you to us and to us directly. And all of this creates the input into a list of potential projects. Those potential projects are screened based on principles, the principles that I just described. We also have a qualitative screening because we still need to use our brains. It can't always be a number outcome. And then we recommend the 5-year capital program. And we're not done yet. Once we recommend that, it goes through the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, or CLIC. There are 33 appointed citizen members. CLIC reviews all of our requests. I believe it is the most time-consuming, highest level of commitment of any of our boards and commissions. And they do an amazing job of getting through all the projects. And not only that, having really good discussion about the projects. CLIC then recommends a list of projects to the mayor and to the city council. There is some discussion about that. Very often we accept CLIC's comments. Sometimes we clarify, sometimes we don't. I will say that of the 3 years that I've been here, we had some very good comments that we were able to address and ended in probably the best place possible, reconciling our proposal with CLIC comments. That goes to the mayor, and the mayor then submits the recommendation. Don't expect you to digest this entire table. But it's important that we look at the breakdown of where our capital dollars are going. 31% over 5 years to street paving, 2% to sidewalks, 4% roughly to bridges. Traffic control and street lighting is about 4%. Bike and ped projects, about a 1.5% or so. Sanitary sewers, 6%. Storm sewers, 10%. And water infrastructure, about 13%. And that 72%, that 70% is 72% of the city's capital investment. So I bet to some of you, some of these numbers on this table look small, such as bike ped projects, sidewalks. And I want to say up front that that is not the only way we invest in walking, biking, and safety. And so as I talk about street paving in capital, and I highlight the street paving work, I want to remind you of our process of complete streets. So every time we have a street paving project, we evaluate holistically, what does that street need? So we're proposing to resurface 25 to 30 miles in 2019, to rehabilitate 2 to 3 miles of concrete, to reconstruct 5 to 6 miles of streets, and to renovate or reconstruct 12 to 13 alleys. And as we look at each one of these projects, if I backcast our previous projects, there isn't a one that doesn't include a pedestrian improvement or a bikeway improvement or a way to opportunistically make it a better street for everyone. So while the dollar amounts look real large for paving and real small for sidewalks, we can consider paving as more than just the surface of the street. Really important that we treat the surface of the street. If we don't, it gets more expensive later. And opportunistically, as we do so, we are able to build in so much that helps our residents and visitors move around. So just, for example, the impacts of street paving projects, 4 different examples where we've been able to make the street better, not just on the surface, but for everyone using the street, and to really make that commitment to complete streets and to Vision Zero. And also there's more. So in addition to the higher dollar amounts of street paving program, our sidewalk program, we are proposing $4.4 million for 2019, $24 million over 5 years. This is specifically to address defective and hazardous sidewalks or missing sidewalk segments through the city. We're proposing $2.7 million in 2019 in our bridge program, We perform bridge safety inspections per federal and state mandates annually. We have very specialized staff. I had an opportunity to perform one of these, or I should say just ride along on one of these inspections. I didn't actually perform it because I'm not trained in it, but I got in the, I always call it a picker, but it's not a picker. Snooper. I got in the snooper and went under the 10th Avenue Bridge. It is highly specialized work. It's work that we take so seriously, and it really guides our annual program and funding recommendations. For 2019, we're proposing about 2.7 between repair and rehab and some work on Bridge 9. The bridge program is one where we really rely on collaboration with the state and with the county to both coordinate our improvements as well as receive very important external funding to support our work. Within traffic control and street lighting, we're proposing $7.4 million in 2019. A lot more than that for 5 years, but we don't have it on here. Just generally making it a safer place to be and maintaining the system we have, which is ongoing work. We have this broken out into safety improvements, our traffic signals, and traffic management systems. And if you haven't had a chance to visit us in our traffic control center, it's a worthwhile visit to see just how we monitor and maintain that system of signals. And once again, in addition to being opportunistic with the street paving, we have an additional $2.1 million proposed for 2019. We're relying heavily on crash studies. We have better and better data and information, even as recently as last month, with an update to the studies to make sure we have the most current information. And we select these very similarly as we would any major capital project on the asset condition, on equity, on uses and mode. And in 2019, we have this divided out between the Safe Routes to School program, general pedestrian safety improvements, and protected bikeways. So as I described our business lines of public works, that reflects the work of the transportation business line. And now I'm moving into the work of our utilities, the capital work that is needed for our utilities, beginning with sanitary sewers. So we're pretty much done televising the sanitary sewers. It's a 2-year project to get underneath the ground and literally put a TV camera, for lack of better terms, into the pipe to look at the condition. And I don't think we were pleased with with the data we got back and what we found. And I think the condition is worse than we anticipated. Over 80% of our sanitary sewers are over 80 years old, with some of them dating back into the 1800s. This is the same principle as when we invest in the pavement condition now, we avoid very costly repairs later. It is the same principle with pipes underneath the ground, that when we invest early, we avoid more costly open trench repairs later. So using this asset management framework and using the data that we have back from the televising, we're proposing rehabilitation, $14 million, and infiltration and inflow for $3.5 million. The total for 2019 proposed is $18.5 million. Same exact principle for storm sewers, and same story. So additional analysis over the last 2 years has been done to understand flow models. So a lot of modeling together with our partners to understand how water is moving through our systems. And I will take this point of privilege here to say that climate change is directly affecting our work, and it's happening now. We have increased rain events. We have more rain events. They're longer in duration, and they're dropping more rain than ever before, and our curves are showing it. And that management is becoming more and more difficult. And you all feel it in your neighborhoods in flood areas. Through this modeling, we've identified 5 areas that are prone to flooding that we have determined should be pilot areas that we can begin to address both on the surface of the street and below ground. So these 5 areas are shown on the map. Katrina Kessler and her team are determining what the right fixes might be in those areas, and you can expect to hear more about that. The modeling shows that the capacity of our system is not keeping up. So our investments need to help us keep pace with the changing climate. Another tour I would highly recommend is going to see the giant hole. Still a hole, I'm sure. Big hole, Skinnyfield. Maybe missed the opportunity at Fridley. At our primary filtration plant, Fridley, we have 2. Fridley's the larger of the 2. We are constantly making investments so that we continue to have the best drinking water that meets all standards. We just got our couple-year certification back that we are in compliance with federal standards, and not only that, we regularly get compliments on the quality of our water. It takes a lot of investment to keep this system as good and strong as it is today and into the future. So our work is based on, again, modeling of the hydraulic system and the pipes, the criticality of the pipes in the system, what is most important to invest in first, second, and third. We look at the probability of main breaks and invest in those areas. And then, as this is a very large business of the city, we look at our exposure from a business perspective. We have some large and ongoing expenses in the water fund. One of those is the new filtration plant that I noted earlier, and that is a several-year investment that is just ongoing through this year and future years. But one coming up is the 10th Avenue Bridge Main. We talk a lot about the bridge. We were very fortunate to receive some state funding for the bridge, but we need to move the water main. It currently hangs off the bottom of the bridge. We are tunneling it underneath the river, and so that is included in here. We are changing out our metering system and entering the modern age. So we are installing advanced meters into our residents' homes. That's just starting to roll out now, and it will help people better monitor their water use and will help us remotely monitor water use. And then electrical services rehabilitation is also included in this capital budget. So we thought it would be helpful for you to see a map of 2019. We couldn't fit all 5 years of projects onto a map, but the distribution of projects through the city, what we're working on in all of these areas, this is transportation only, laid out for 2019. Madam Chair, I'll stop here to see if there are any questions on the proposed capital budget for 2019.
Thank you. I don't see any in queue, but I invite my colleagues to make comments or ask questions as they see fit. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first I want to make a comment that I think over the past few years after the adoption of our Complete Streets policy, we've really seen the power of having strong commitment from policymakers paired with a plan. So our protected bikeway plans and our previous Access Minneapolis plan, they really do come true, and you see it every day in the streets. I think the number one reason I get stopped in the grocery store or at the park when I'm with my kids is for people to thank me for the protected bikeways that have been built in Ward 10. that's actually true. People love them because they're making our neighborhoods safer and more accessible. I think it would be great to have an update at TPW about the protected bikeway plan and just the status of that very specific 5-year plan and what projects have been built so far, and then the plans for the next couple of years. And then I just wanted to say, I'm so excited for the update to our plan. I think we have a very solid transportation plan now, but after we adopt a comprehensive plan and look forward to the next few decades in our city, I think the two pieces where we really have a lot of opportunity is to be more specific in our pedestrian safety plans. We have a really good base that we're using through our Complete Streets policy, but I think we'll be able to use this data-driven approach that the department is really focused on to highlight those projects that will make a huge difference for pedestrian safety. And then, of course, our transit system and the really exciting opportunity for the first time at this level of detail, really put forward our city's vision for how we want our transit system to work. And I think those are so important as we go forward with a comprehensive plan that continues to concentrate almost all of the growth in already the densest neighborhoods in the city and those that are fastest growing. And if we don't make commensurate investments in transportation access, we're just creating congested neighborhoods with lots of car traffic. And that's not the vision. The vision for our comprehensive plan is to concentrate growth near transit so that people have the opportunity to have alternative transportation choices. So I think the Public Works Department is doing a great job in leading that, but we need to tie those things together as policymakers and ensure that we are really making those investments that enable that vision to be a responsible one. And again, not just concentrate congestion in those neighborhoods that are already the most dense in the city. So those are comments you can feel free to elaborate if you'd like, but I just really want to thank the department. There has been just a huge shift in, I think, just the speed with which we're making these projects happen in the right of way, and my constituents are noticing. Like I said, I really do get thanked all of the time, like on the street in my ward, because of all the great work that you're all doing.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Bender, thank you so much for your comments and your support. It's a moment where I want to recognize the staff and the team again. The 20-year streets funding plan was a game changer for us. Our workload increased a lot, and not just in paving and reconstruction, but in the utilities, because we have to time them, and in our capital planning. The workload has increased tremendously, and it's this professional staff that just keeps going and keeps rising to the challenge.
Ms. Hutchinson, to that end, I'm going to interject my own part because it relates to some of this, is that CLIC's 2018 report identified a number of challenges, including the possibility of double assessments, where residents or property owners might face special assessments for, say, both sidewalk and paving projects at the same time. Can you tell me, what is the severity of that issue? I know that in the past, myself and a colleague have kind of worked that out between different resources and paving projects to try to spread that out over a couple years' time. And I'm just curious how you and your staff might work to prevent double assessments.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I'll answer in two ways. The first is we've actually caught a couple of double assessments and corrected them. That happened, I think, on 42nd Avenue North, where it was brought to our attention and we rectified it quickly. When I say double assessments, I really mean double assessment, that they got assessed for the same thing twice. We don't anticipate making, that will not happen again, I'm assured. So when we find issues like that, we quickly fix it for the resident. On the broader question of what you're calling double assessment, but what I think you might mean is that they're going to be assessed for the street, but then a few years later we'll come back and we'll assess them again for the sidewalk. And I think your question is there an opportunity to do it all together?
I think, no, actually my concern is that they are being assessed for both in the same year. And I'm just curious how often do you know what the severity of that issue is? Is it as much as it was called, is it a problem like it was called out in the CLIC report? Or what do you do about that?
Madam Chair, thanks for the clarification on the question. I think it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that Lisa Cerny has been working on with a couple of our division directors to see if there's a way to, in essence, organize the assessments better to lighten the burden. I don't have a proposal on that today, but it is something that through that click report and also through residents and what we hear, we know is something that we might improve upon.
Great. Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned the need for better infrastructure due to climate change. And so I'm curious, looking at the capital program principles, we don't necessarily see green infrastructure be called out within that. And so, as we are thinking about redoing the storm water management system, how are we thinking about the filtration of the water? Are we looking at, so that we're not just moving all this water, dirty water, into our water sources? How are we thinking differently about how we are building, what the materials are, just that sort of thing? How does that fit into our basic infrastructure?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, thank you so much for that question. I think we easily could put that as a principle, and it might be something that you see next year, and it is a principle that we are working with. And I might say it ripples through really all of our capital projects, whether it be transportation or stormwater or drinking water. Your question about stormwater management, I'm really pleased to answer you and say that on November 12th, I think is the date, we have a staff person beginning work who is our green infrastructure coordinator. That was something that we proposed last year, and we were awarded funding to actually hire a person that will help bring the planning work, the street planning work, together with the stormwater management work in a more strategic way. So that person begins in November. The work does occur, and we plan to accelerate it, excuse me, with the addition of a coordinator that can work between the two.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. So it's exciting to see the planned capital investments. We have a whole bunch of streets that really need it, that we hear a lot about. And when we look at that map for 2019, in fact, if we can go back to that, there's some stuff there that people are really excited about. We just got Simon Bolensky was in to talk about the 4th Street and University project that Marcy Holmes is really excited about and has wanted for a long time, and obviously some of the North Loop work is really exciting. I wanted to sort of just note, though, that when we talk about our sort of 5-year capital plan and things get talked about going through that process, a lot of times people come to us and they say, this intersection doesn't feel safe, this street doesn't feel safe to use, and we say, well, we'll get it in the 5-year capital plan, so it'll get slotted in for 2022, and that's not a very satisfying answer. And so I'm very interested a lot of times in figuring out sort of how do we speed some of that up where it feels urgent, especially where there's new development that's really changing the use of the streets. As Council President Bender talked about, really thinking about where are the challenges of density needing to be met by the way we design our street infrastructure, and how can we think more about that. And particularly some of the places where there are no colored lines that I'm hearing a lot about are places where there is active development happening and where we actually have the ability to sort of supplement our taxpayer-funded capital investments with investments by developers as part of their public realm improvements when they're tearing up our curbs anyway, so they're going to rebuild them either the way they were or the new way we asked them to, if we have enough of a plan. And there are places in the city where we've done a really good job of doing that. When you look at downtown East and the way that pedestrian plan was made around the Wells Fargo towers and a lot of the ways that got implemented, we managed to get a lot of private capital added onto our public capital for street improvements. And I just want to say I'm hopeful that we can do more of that, because we have a lot of projects that I think could be utilized to do public realm improvement. And we have to sort of have a plan to make that happen. So I'll offer that as a comment, and if there's anything you want to respond to.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Fletcher. I'll respond first by saying that there's two ways that we can make improvements. The one way is the capital side of things, but there are improvements that we can make sometimes that are outside of the capital program. For example, we just made an improvement in your ward on 10th Street. We didn't need capital dollars to do that. That's within a traffic budget. And if the data supports it and it's aligned with the community's desires, sometimes we can do it without having to have a capital budget. We do have an operating budget as well. And to your comments, I will just comment, yes, there is the faster development moves, the faster we need to move, and that is sometimes challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing others in queue right now, so let me go back to a click question. On your slide, you had a slide that was pretty broad strokes, but how there's that huge spreadsheet that then goes in part into click, and then out comes the mayor's budget. And I'm curious, I understand that Public Works has a process to identify and include budgets, and I'm curious, how does that relate to the projects that are finally recommended to click? How filtered down does that list get? Because I think I've seen the spreadsheet before and it's multiple tabs, it's enormous. So could you just share a little bit more about that vetting process?
Sure. Chair Palmisano, we go through a very detailed numerical evaluation of projects based on the criteria that we set forward in the 20-year streets funding plan, using that as the base. And the first piece of criteria is the condition of the asset. We're not going to fix something that isn't broken, so we look at what's broken first. And then the second two parts are equity-based, modal equity, and is it within a racially concentrated area of poverty, and it gets more weight if it is. That helps us sort through the many tabs of projects and information that we have. We then, on top of that, provide the qualitative screening, and the qualitative screening is like, oh, well, Glenn's got a project. He had it for 3 years from now, but this street project is top of the list. It's 1 year from now. And so let's do the smart thing and dig once and do it all at once. So that's the kind of more, I'll say, qualitative work that comes into play. Or we had a project, conversely, we have a project, it's scheduled for next year, but this development isn't done for another 2. So we don't want to build it, tear it up and build it. So we might push something out. And that's sort of the last component of our analysis. That is what makes up the final list that we propose to click.
Thank you. And then in terms of the 20-year Parks and Roads program, I'm curious, from your perspective, are we meeting our own ordinance at this point in time?
Chair Palmisano, we are meeting the ordinance.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't really help but take the opportunity to highlight the way that our Public Works Department is nationally known for the work that they have done in the last couple of years for taking a race equity lens and an economic access equity lens to our capital programming. There are no other cities in the country that are really matching our innovation in this space, and our staff are frequently invited to share this experience through the NACTO organization that Minneapolis is a founding member of. That organization, National Organization of Transportation.
National Association of City Transportation
There you go. City transportation officials who are shifting, street design standards and work across the country in cities and urban contexts. And our staff have been involved in that organization from the very beginning. But we gave our staff a big task of programming $400 million over 20 years, and they, I think, really hit it out of the park in the way that we are using a data-driven approach. We're taking I think staff is frequently adjusting the formula as we learn more from our experiences, and we've been getting those updates frequently at TPW over the last couple of years, but wanted to make sure that everyone knows how recognized we are across the country for this work.
Indeed, I'd echo that. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Just one quick question about sort of how we think about race equity in terms of capital investments related to public works, because in kind of identifying where there's concentrated poverty and where people of color are most using our roadways, that might not coincide with where people live or what a census tract would show. So I'm sort of curious. So for example, an investment on Nicollet Mall or a major transit hub, which is where a lot of people are going to come together. Those streets are going to be used by everybody. If you looked at sort of who lives there, there might be like one luxury condo building that makes it look like not a place to make an equity investment. But if you look at who's using the street, so I guess I'm just curious, sort of how are you thinking about race equity in terms of how we identify who we're serving when we make repairs to particular roadways?
Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Fletcher, once again, a two-part response here. The first is we need some kind of organizing principle to evaluate projects as they come in. The Met Council publishes the areas of racially concentrated areas of poverty, and that is a good construct for us to work with as we're working through that long list of projects. But that's not the only way we look at racial equity in our work. It's $9,000 for someone $9,000 a year for someone to own a car. So our work to improve transit and provide more walking and biking choices and opportunities is very much an equity conversation. Car ownership is very expensive, and it's, for some people, their only option to get around. So the more that we make our network accessible to people who maybe don't have a car, either can't afford it or don't want to afford it, that's very much an equity question as well. We're reducing, we talk a lot about affordable housing, and we are interested in public works and, did I say reducing affordable housing? Improving affordable housing, and I think we in public works see it very holistically, and that we want to improve affordability, thinking both about housing and transportation together.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions at this time. Let's go ahead to the rates.
Our last component of the presentation is the utility rate recommendations. It is provided to you at the end because our rates are a combination of operating and capital. And for the recommendation this year, capital is very much driving our proposed rates and the increases that you will see. So we are proposing a 4.3% increase in the utility rates for 2019. The largest increase is in the sanitary system, and it is almost entirely based on the conditions that I described to you in the capital presentation. These are necessary investments so that we can maintain the system to the standard that I think our residents expect. We also have a small increase in stormwater. The remainder of these are pretty much right on where we projected they would be last year. So we try to give you a 5-year projection. The only one that's higher in any significant way is the sanitary system. The rest increase slightly. Stormwater, again, mostly on the infrastructure. On water, very much about infrastructure. These are all planned improvements, and we expected these rates to be right where they are. And on solid waste, we have some increases there, and it is largely due to some labor contracts, as well as the cost to pick up large items is just increasing. Our contracts are going up. The value of those contracts is more. So in total, we have about a $4 per household increase in the rates proposed for 2019. Pause for questions.
I'm not seeing any questions. Could you tell us, I didn't see it in your presentation, but what is the 5-year projection for some of these fees? I appreciate that you usually stick to your forecast, but I'm just curious from a capital standpoint, kind of what is that forecast? Do you have a sense of how much they're going up over the next 5 years? If not, you can get us that information.
Chair Palmisano, I don't have that sheet of paper with me. It is possible that Mr. Jelly does or Ms. Stone does. Okay, we are happy to provide you with that information.
That's fine. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the city of St. Paul is having a long conversation right now about municipal waste and recycling. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is this concept of the shared economy and not having to have your own recycling, your own garbage, your own composting. I can kind of use myself as an example of which I have one bag of garbage a week. And at the most, it's half full, and I have my own cart. And yet I could maybe share with my neighbor right next to me, who's also one person. Have we ever thought about potentially moving in that direction as a way to encourage people to use less waste, is to not force everybody to have a garbage can? I don't think that for recycling. I have lots of recycling. But with garbage in particular, it seems like we would want to be encouraging people to share.
Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Goodman, I don't know if that is something we have considered, and I have an excellent resource here who may be able to answer that question, or just shake your head if we have not considered. Mr. Herboholz, could you please join me?
Madam Chair, Council Member Goodman, we, as part of our zero waste plan and diversion in the future, we are looking at methods for cart reduction, and we'll continue that conversation. As of right now, it's a little bit difficult because we're so concerned with keeping our materials clean, non-contamination, and that. So we really need to think it out very well as far as shared containers and reducing waste, and those that may need a little more education on how to properly do that.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm not sure I understood that. What kind of education would you need to be able to put your garbage in somebody else's can and not have your own can?
Well,
doesn't seem like that's that difficult.
Well,
and we do it for composting, right? So I don't have a composting bin because I'm scared. I'm one person. I'd have like this much compost in it, and I don't want another. But I could walk it over to Robin's house probably and use hers. I mean, I think the idea is we want to try to get people to share, and I would never have been pushing this as a policy issue, but St. Paul is grappling, I think wrongly, with the idea that they don't need organized collection. But it brings up the fact that 9,000 people in the city of St. Paul shared garbage cans. And I do wonder, to be honest, if we really need to have everybody having a garbage can when the amount of garbage is so much smaller. Why wouldn't we be encouraging people to share? Not to save money as much, just to save on the cans and every stop they have to pick it up.
But the initial step that we're making right now is reduction of the larger garbage cans to smaller ones, just because of the ability to recycle more and to participate in the organics program. The next step would be to possibly look at some sharing of containers.
I mean, I think I'm just going to speak for myself. I already have the smaller can, and I still only have one bag. And I live next to two people on either side of me who are one person in their whole house. So it seems like we would want to get people to have, not on recycling or composting, but on garbage. If we're trying to get people to use less, maybe we should allow them to share cans.
Well taken.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in queue, so. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo those thoughts as well. I usually only have one bag of garbage, and usually my recycling bin is overflowing, and which has actually caused me, because of the city's cadence on recycling, it's caused me to examine, am I over-consuming recyclable items here, but which is a great problem to have when we've got a lot of recycling and very little trash. So hopefully over time we can make that adjustment.
We can just consider that a comment. A question that I have in our budget books is that both stormwater and solid waste currently have double its target cash balance for 2019, and I was curious if you are saving up for something important, or why that means that then we are increasing the rates for next year.
Madam Chair, I'll begin to answer that question and see if I can do it justice. We do have healthy cash balances in both of those funds. We have large capital projects that have a fair amount of debt associated with them that we plan to pay over time. The larger the capital project, the more conservative we want to be with the cash balances and the cash flow. And I'll just say that that is something that Finance has asked us to take a look at as well, and we are.
Super. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue. I'm not seeing anyone else on the dais, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano and council members for this time to present to you, and I look forward to a continued discussion. And thank you so much for your positive comments and your support. We really we hear it and we really appreciate it.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Next up, and we are about 10 minutes early, running 10 minutes early. Next, we have the capital and debt budget presentation from Mr. Mike Abeln. Ah, you're here. I didn't see you hiding in the back. Terrific. We'll give you just a minute to get situated here, and then we'll begin. In this interim, I will add that Public Works was one of our very pilot results projects last year. They did in collaboration with a university, they did a What Works kind of project and used a couple of different components of Public Works. Their results data this year is incredibly interesting, but because I thought by digging into it we would go over their time, I'm going to send my questions to them, and I offered to invite you to add them to mine. When I get the responses, I will share it with the Budget Committee. So welcome, Mr. Abel.
Good morning, Chair Palmisano and members of the committee. I'm here today from Finance. I'm the Director of Investments in Capital and Debt Management for the city, and I will be talking to you about the 2019 through 23 capital improvement program, as well as the debt service budget for the city's various outstanding bonds. So in terms of the agenda, with regard to the capital improvement program, I'm going to first start out with some high-level overview of the 5-year plan and then the 1-year plan for 2019. And then a little later on, I'll go into actually some projects that are in the plan for the various divisions and departments of the city. And then we'll talk about the debt service budget, some things that are going on with regards to debt and debt issuance, and then the debt service budget itself. And then there'll be time for questions at the end. All right, in terms of the budget, in the 5-year plan, we have a budget of almost $1.1 billion. This is a new record as far as the total amount of requests and items that are in the budget. Part of this increase this year is due to having the new Public Service Center in the budget and represented in years both 19 and 20 and then a little bit in 21. So that is in total about $210 million or $213 million of this 5-year plan. So typical would be more in the 700 to 800, 900 sort of million range. You can see that Public Works is 72% of our budget this year, and Public Grounds and Facilities, which includes police and fire station projects and other Public Works buildings, as well as the two very large, or the large Public Service Center, are actually 21%. So that's going to be an anomaly of sorts for the next couple of years as that very large project works its way through the system. We're funded about 21% with cash, about 62% with debt, and 17% from things like special assessments and municipal state aid and federal and county grants, et cetera, miscellaneous sources. And this is a graph that shows the various funding sources in the 5-year plan. So net debt bonds is showing 41%. the typical sort of net debt bonds, which are the property tax supported debt that we use for streets and roads and bridges and traffic signal and sign and pedestrian improvements. That is typically about 23% of our funding for our capital plan. And this year now for 19 and 20, we have that large amount of additional debt that is associated with the Public Service Center. So we have 41% in net debt bonds. And you can see enterprise bonds and revenues of 28%. Robin had talked to you about the significant capital occurring within the enterprise funds. So that is always a large part of our 5-year plan as well. In terms of 2019, the numbers are a little bit smaller for public works, again, because of the public grounds and facilities area having a disproportionately higher percentage in 19 and 20. Typically, the Public Works Department, it represents over 75% of the capital of the city.
And I'll just note that on your slide there, you have an interesting picture because it's one of our many bridges that goes over the Greenway. Did you want to say anything about that?
Madam Chair, I don't have any comments about the pictures. They're just sort of there to show, different types of infrastructure that we are spending money on capital.
Okay.
Okay, for the 2019 funding then, again, net debt bonds and CIP bonds are a disproportionately large portion of the 2019 program. Again, we have the big Public Service Center in there. In terms of dollars, the net debt bonds for typical infrastructure is about $49 million, and then we've got about $95 million in 2019 for ongoing Public Service Center construction. So this shows the next two slides just sort of detail a little bit about the various funding sources. So net debt bonds here is $144.3 million for 2019. Again, you can see Public Works total of 27.4. That's kind of typical for them. And Park Board has got 10.5 million. That's going to be typical for their level of funding, as well as Municipal Building Commission. And Public Grounds and Facilities, you can see there a big chunk of that is the CIP bonds and other debt for the City Hall improvements and new Public Service Center. And just as an FYI, the City Hall improvements will occur probably in like year 3 of this plan after people start moving into the new facility. Then we'll be doing some improvements in City Hall to accommodate the remaining employees. And in terms of the other sources, I talked about that 17%. You see municipal state aid and special assessments. A lot of dollars are in that sanitary sewer, storm, water, a little bit in the parking fund, and then federal and county grants and transfers. So there's a broad range of funding sources that come to bear in the city's capital program. It's not like we have to go into debt for everything we do. We do use cash. We do use several other sources that we leverage. Okay. This is a picture of the 20-year Streets and Neighborhood Parks Plan. This just shows the funding sources that have been added to get to the increments of additional expanded work for these two areas. So you can see over the 5-year plan, about $155 million of additional spending that is occurring on top of what was previously sort of the base funding for these programs. So like the net debt bonds you see there, for instance, for Park Board, $8 million a year. The base was about $2.5 million. So when we look at their details, they have about $10.5 million of net debt bond funding and then some of their own park capital levy. So that they'll have, we'll see the total in projects in a minute. And then as far as the other city side, we have the net debt bonds, of course, as part of this funding for paving projects. We have a storm revenue source that's helping to do a lot of the work that happens in the street when you're doing street paving projects. And then we have some transfers from the general fund and transfers from special revenue. These are some of those cash sources I mentioned. And you can see as we go further out into this plan, transfers from the general fund become a larger portion of that funding, and that has to do with the decertification of the a very large TIF district, the consolidated district, and that's freeing up capacity then to be able to do some cash-based funding for the capital program. Okay, any questions? So now I'm going to go through just some departments and some of the individual projects that are in the departments. So the next series of slides shows the 2019 allocation to given projects, and then it shows the 19 through 23 5-year plan. So we talked about the almost 1.1 billion. That would be the mayor's recommended 2019 through 23 column, and then the 2019 column would be the 283 million in total. So for the building commission in 2019, what's in the program for them is about $2 million for elevator upgrades and modernization, and then some safety improvements in what's called non-stage work areas. So this program was a long-term program for public safety in office spaces initially. So it was like water sprinkler systems and fire alarms and things like that that were in office spaces. Now they're expanding to sort of the common areas. So putting in these systems in the atrium and various other sort of public parts of the building. And this funding is about 50% county and 50% city. The city hall is owned as a joint facility, and on a capital basis, the city and county share pretty much 50-50 with those investments in the building itself. For the park board, this is the complete list of projects for the park board. So again, you can see what's in the 2019 program, and sometimes you can see that it's part of a bigger 5-year plan. For instance, in the playground and site improvements, they have a lot of different projects, obviously, that they would be working on here. For 2019, that's 2.2 of the total of 7.2 in the 5-year plan. And then you can see something like Curry Park implementation. It's 2.2 out of the 2.2, so that's a 2019 only thing, and there's no further out-year spending arranged for it. So some things have no money in 2019, then you can tell that they're part of the 5-year plan in one of the out years.
If I could just pause here, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the parkways, I get a lot of calls about the parkways. And is there any near-term commitment for them to invest in there right away? Particularly since there's a lot of constituent confusion about who's responsible for what. And I could have asked you this offline, but I think I want to say it here to the public.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Reich, the Parkways program is actually part of the Public Works paving area. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to see that reflected here in what I'm showing for their sort of neighborhood improvement programs. Mm-hmm. So there is some funds committed to parkway paving in Public Works Department, and they have a plan that's ongoing for improvements to parkways. I see, Robin, do you want to say a few things as well?
I can help clarify.
Okay, please.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Reich, it's included in the Public Works list of projects for next year and 5-year. It is in our plans to do some parkway repaving next year. Last year, we worked together with Park Board, is it Commissioner? Park Board Commissioner Jane Miller, thanks to find just a bit more funding to support the parkway improvements with the goal of keeping their parkways, really our parkways, at the same level and condition as the rest of our streets. So there's a bit more in the paving program that helps support that program.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. So for the Public Works Department, I know they've already spoke to you this morning about capital, but this slide just shows of the 10 largest program areas or capital projects that they've submitted in the 5-year plan. it shows that about 40% of their requests for 19 through 23 that are in the plan to be recommended are these 10 areas. So you can see that these are a lot of the program areas like water distribution improvements and sanitary tunnels, and the asphalt pavement program, of course, is in there. And the only standalone program in there is Nicollet Avenue Bridge over Minnehaha Creek, which is a big program coming in the out years. So a lot of their base sort of ongoing capital programs, repairs to storm tunnels, sanitary tunnels, and the streets are in a program where they do some of that work every year. Okay? I couldn't list all of the projects that they have because they do have quite a few. In terms of public grounds and facilities, I've talked about the City Hall and Public Service Center improvements. So there's about $100 million in 2019 and $213.9 in the 5-year plan. Most of that is the new Public Service Center, and then about $30 million of that is City Hall improvements that will come as well as part of that big program that's going on. Fire Station number 1 is another good-sized project, and I just want to bring to your attention, there's numbers on the left-hand side next to the description. So if you add, those are the prior allocations that have been approved for those projects. So if you take that number and add it to what's in the 5-year plan, you can get a gauge of what the total is for those various projects. So in the case of new Fire Station 11 there would be $5.4 million allocated toward it so far in the 5-year plan. And Fire Station number 1, for instance, would be $4.5 million plus $7 million, so that's like $11.5 million. The capital program, of course, crosses years. Some things are already funded, and the 19 through 23 program is a continuation of those. So sometimes the funding has to go into the out years. So this is a way to show previous allocations for projects that maybe haven't even started yet, but there's funding in place to do them when we can get them bid out and get working on them.
So, Mr. Abel, that's a question I have. How often is it that an out-year program will be rescheduled forward or backward? And what kind of assurance does the public have about some of the ways the project impacts their neighborhoods?
Madam Chair, the only thing that causes them to go, to get pushed back, let's say, is if there's some mitigating circumstance. A lot of times with street projects, if the county is doing some work in an area and we get crossed up, we may push ours off a year or two to let them get through with their stuff. With these building projects like the ones that are on this page, timing can be dependent on various factors, the bidding environment, whether or not the designs are done, whether or not the neighborhood agrees with, the location of a project. So it's really project by project specific. There's no way I could say, on average 25% of the programs get pushed off or delayed. So it's really depends on what's going on in a given project area.
Thanks.
Miscellaneous projects, the only thing that's in this category of projects right now is art and public places, and there is a ordinance to provide 1.5% of the city's net debt bond funding toward public art projects, and in this 5-year plan that requirement is being met. All right, any other questions about capital? Otherwise, I'll move on to the debt side.
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. All right, a couple terms. So we've talked about the term net debt bonds, and really that just means property tax supported debt. It's the kind of debt that funds the basic infrastructure of the city, police and fire stations, streets, roads, bridges, kind of the things that the general public uses and the city uses to provide services. As opposed to enterprise funds where, it's like a business being run to provide service such as sewer services or water to your house, etc. And then the bond redemption levy is the specific tax levy that's set aside to pay for debt that is of this property tax supported type. And debt service we're going to talk about is for principal and interest both. So when we talk about what is the debt service budget, it means both the principal and interest on the bonds. Another term that a lot of people hear is debt capacity. What is the city's debt capacity? And again, this is related to the property tax supported portion of the city's debt. And we are required to not incur more than 3.3% of our outstanding debt versus our market value of our city's property values. So for 2017, that means we could have had up to 1.47 billion of this kind of debt outstanding. We are significantly below that, of course, at 0.11 billion. So we do have a lot of room for additional work legally that we could incur debt for. That doesn't necessarily mean we want to afford that much debt, but the capacity is there, so we don't currently have a debt capacity issue where we're pushing up against limits based on our property values. In the last decade, we're going to see some slides that talk about sort of the debt, and the city has made a lot of strides in getting sort of debt paid down, and that's now providing the opportunity to do large projects such as the new public service center and expanding the 20-year capital program. So a lot of that pre-work that was done the last decade is now allowing us to make those investments in our infrastructure. This picture here is a per person view of the property tax supported debt. So back in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we were doing a lot of the debt for the central library system and the community libraries. So during that time frame, we incurred a lot of property tax supported debt for that program. We're now heavily in pay down mode on that type of debt. And that's largely behind what you're seeing here in the reduction in the amounts through 15-16. The fact that it's starting to go up again in 17 and 18 has to do with the 20-year paving program and streets and sort of getting more funding going into the city's infrastructure. Oops. And then this is the bond redemption levy, just a graph of what we used to pay for. So in the 5-year plan now for 19 through 23, our debt payments, our ability to pay debt payments, we will be levying 42 million, 44, 46. So those numbers are going up as it relates to the fact that we're issuing more debt for paving and parks. And so we're going to need more resources to pay debt. As that debt gets incurred, we need more resources to keep making payments on it and keep it under control as far as how much debt we incur and then paying off that debt relatively aggressively. And then down below is the library levy, and that levy had been set at $9.3 million per year from many years ago. You see that continuing through 2017, and then in 2018 and beyond, that levy is actually going to $10.3 million, and that's as a result of the state agreeing to a program where they're helping to subsidize the payment of that debt, that principal, to help us get out of that debt. It had to do with a deal that St. Paul also had on, I believe, their civic center. And so this is a $10.3 million levy. And in the future, starting in 21 and thereon, some of that levy is going to start to be the source of funds that are used for the debt service on the public service center and city hall improvements. So that will continue on into the future for quite a few years to pay for the new facility and improvements here in City Hall. And the bond redemption levy, the main one you see going up to 51, that's for the base capital program. That's always been in place, plus now the expanded. So that's going to continue to grow for a while that program's large expenditures are going on. Okay. We just got done issuing 2 series of bonds. I know Marcus sent out something on our ratings, so Standard & Poor's gave us a AAA rating with a stable outlook. That is as high as you can get from a bond rating agency. And Fitch also gave us a AA+, which is 1 notch below that, also a stable rating. So those are very, very high bond ratings, and they help sell our bonds at the lowest rates possible. So we like to try and keep those up. In terms of the amounts we sold, the slide was prepared and had to be sent to the city clerk's office before the actual bond sale occurred. We ended up selling $96.22 million worth of bonds for the East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility and the new Public Service Center. And then we sold $15.71 million for the library refunding. So right now we're in the process of paying down the library debt, and we have an opportunity to refund and restructure that debt based on the resources that we're getting from the state and cash on hand. So that money is only going to be out there for 2 years. So it's a very short debt. Our actual rate that we're paying on that debt is a little over 2%. So it's still pretty competitive. And then for the larger series of bonds, that debt goes out till 2046, and the interest rate, the true interest cost on that debt was 3.67%. So a much longer debt, you get into higher interest rates for that particular piece of debt. And also as part of that debt, there is some dollars to help pay the interest on that debt while that facility is being constructed. So we actually received around $101 million worth of proceeds by selling $96.22 million of bonds. And that's due to the receipt of a bond premium, which means the coupon rates on the bonds are a little bit higher than the market, and the investors have to give you additional proceeds. I don't want to get into the details of that, but that's sort of what happens on every bond sale. You either sell at a premium or discount, and lately it's been a premium. In terms of outstanding debt from years 2009 to 18, this shows in billions, so it's kind of a hard number to conceive, but in 2009 we had $1.08 billion of outstanding general obligation debt. Now in 2018 we have $0.68 billion, so that's about $400 million less than we had basically a decade ago. So that's showing sort of how that debt capacity number, then a part of that debt is the property tax supported, which gives us that capacity. So the city's debt has been going down most recently. That may change in the future with some very large projects occurring, but we try to pay our debt off very aggressively. And then the other category of debt there is non-general obligation bonds, and that has to do with a business program that we help with private businesses to issue debt and grow jobs in the city, as well as a few housing-related things where tax increment funds are used to help get a project off the ground. So there's a few of those projects. That debt, as you can also see, is going down to about $80,000 worth, or I think it's actually going to end up being about $65,000 or $65 million by the end of this year. All right, so this slide here shows the balances of various kinds of debt that the city has on its books. So you can see enterprise funds in total, convention center, the Target Center, etc. And this shows what those balances were at the end of 2004, which wasn't the peak. Actually, it was, but what we're not seeing here is I don't have pension bonds because those have all been paid off. So if we included the pension bonds, we would have had about $1.3 billion of GO debt outstanding. And today, when we end this year, we'll be at closer to $678 million of outstanding general obligation debt. So you can see that from 2004, we've paid off really $503 million plus the $118 of pension bonds. So we've we, the city, have reduced that debt significantly over the last 15 years. Okay. Any questions about this slide? So I'll move on. And then here is the 2019 estimated debt service budget. So you can see some fairly significant principal reductions that make up a large part of this. About 83% of our debt service will be paying off bonds, and about 16 or 17% is interest. So the big pieces that are getting paid off and you won't see after 2020 is the convention center. So we have a big payment in 19 and a big payment in 2020, and then that whole category of debt will be gone. And that is the debt that was associated with the expansion of the convention center back in the early 2000s. The net debt bond area is going to continue to be around that magnitude of debt service each year, maybe even growing some. And that has to do with, the expanded 20-year paving program. And that you can see that 44.7 million, clearly and closely ties to the levies that we have to create to help pay for that category of debt. Tax increment debt, we haven't issued any new tax increment debt for a while, and that debt as a category is falling off significantly off the city's books. So that's kind of been in pay down mode. Enterprise funds, they come and go and have a lot of investments, so they will stay robust in terms of amount of debt service we have to pay on an annual basis to keep projects going. And library referendum debt is going down significantly and will be hopefully gone by year 2022. I'd like to get it gone by 2021, but we can't really ensure that the state's going to come through with their contributions, and so we have to continue levying until 2022, maybe even a small amount in 2023. And then, just trying to see, that's really about all I have to say. So 138.4 million for 2019. I will let you know that I will be coming forward with a technical amendment to the mayor's budget as part of markup and final decision making. Because we issued bonds late in the year, these are estimates, so I'm going to have to adjust these dollar amounts, and there will be an amendment I will propose that will correct the 2019 debt service budget now that we know what the real principal and interest is from these bond sales that we just did last week. So there will be some adjustments. They won't be significant because I was trying to take that into account in what you see here today. Okay.
Got it.
In terms of budgeted interest expense, this is just something to kind of show you what's been happening. These rates were coming down for a while. Since the Fed has started to raise rates, they're starting to go the other direction on us. It's not just because of the rate increases, though. It has to do also with some of the projects having longer term debt to them. So the bonds we just issued, for instance, that 3.67% rate is causing the 2019 estimate to actually tweak up a little bit in the total combined rate of the city's debt. And I think the last slide I have is about variable rate debt. The city used to have a lot more variable rate debt when it was much more advantageous to be in that, when the rates were really, really low. We've been making strides to pay off that debt and fix that debt into lower fixed rates the last several years. And at this point, we only have about 4.5% of our total outstanding debt in variable rate mode. And it has to do with two facilities, basically the Riverfront parking ramp or Guthrie ramp and the Nicollet Mall project. And so the Nicollet Mall project was financed with $25 million of assessments. That was all a variable rate note during the construction phase. Since that's over with, we've put in fixed rate mode 17 million of that debt. We've had a lot of prepayments come in from various property owners, including the city, where we've used those resources to pay down some of that variable rate debt, which is one of the big advantages of variable rate, is you can take it out at any time you want. And so we've done that on Nicollet Mall, and we have 3.2 million left outstanding. So rates have been recently 1.8 to 2.06, but they are going up. So as the Fed raises rates, these rates go up pretty quickly in lockstep with the Fed funds rate. It's very short-term debt. So it's a good time to not have tons of it, although it's still a good program because it provides other flexibilities with ability to prepay it early and not have to wait for a call date to get out of debt. So that's about all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything else.
I like that we could also have conclusions for you.
And conclusions. Conclusions are we're in good shape, and we have a healthy infrastructure with growing projects, and the city's taking very good care of its assets.
Thank you, Mr. Abel, for carefully monitoring and managing our assets and our debt management. I don't see any questions or comments in queue except for Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. So I occasionally get the question from constituents, why don't we issue a $500 million bond to build affordable housing? There's a sense of like, we found our 40 million bucks this year, and that's good, but it's, chipping away at the problem. And I'm sort of curious. I think we got a perspective about the capacity is legally there. Sort of how do you think about what the right level of debt is for us to manage, and what are the consequences of us over borrowing, or is that something we should be thinking about?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, that's a really easy question, because with any kind of debt, before you issue it, you have to have a plan to repay it. And so in the case of affordable housing, it's not like planning for a tax levy or planning to raise fees on sewer or water or other services that the city provides. So it's not as easy to say, well, let's issue more of that debt. We could issue that debt and we have the capacity, but you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it as soon as you think about going into debt. The most important thing is, how are we going to pay for that debt? And so that's the thing that we're still having to try and figure out, is what resources can we bring to bear in the future to be able to repay affordable debt that we would issue today. So it's not about capacity to issue, it's about capacity to repay. So I think that's the real thing on any kind of debt. Is debt's a good tool. It helps get things done that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get done. But it's very important to have that plan to how you're going to fund it and repay it over time, both principal and interest.
And is that, because I could imagine us taking out fairly sizable debt and saying like, well, we're committing to paying this out of the general fund, right? I mean, we sort of know that we need to commit money. Are there statutory requirements that it be a dedicated funding source? Are there things that we have to, or is this more just about responsible money management that we want to make sure that we have that plan sort of spelled out or articulated in a clearer way?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, there's a couple things in play. I'm going to go back to your first question about why not issue $500 million and have it available. There's also Treasury regulations that say if you're going to issue tax-exempt debt, you have to utilize those proceeds within 2 years. Otherwise, you have to pay back the federal government any interest that's excess of what you've earned on or what you had to pay on that debt. And you have to get rid of that money quickly. So that is also a restriction and restraint on the timing of how much you issue and when you issue. You have to have a project ready to go. You have to have a plan for how you're going to get rid of that money quickly to get some work done, and not have, the federal government doesn't want us as a city borrowing money on a tax-exempt basis and giving investors a chance to invest that without having to pay taxes on their earnings. And they have very strict requirements on how quickly you need to get rid of that cash. So you have that in addition to, where the sources to repay and what do you, what restrictions do you have on ability to generate those fees to repay that debt service? Because really, in the case of affordable housing, unless we have some dedicated outside funding measures that help to pay that debt, it would be a tax levy likely on the city's residents. So, the ability to do that hinges on your ability and your desire to tax to be able to provide that additional service and program for the residents. And I know Mr. Bruff's in the room. I don't know if he wants to comment additionally on that, but those are some of the things that I would say are, help you sort of think about what can we really do and what do we want to afford for our residents and what do we want to tax for, or do we get outside sources? If we get outside sources, it's a little easier to help fund some of those programs. Okay.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so thank you. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Erin Delaney with the NBC budget. Thank you, Ms. Delaney. We'll just give you a minute to get set up on the computer and everything. Perfect.
Does it? There we go. Here we go. And then. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Erin Delaney, and I'm the director of the Municipal Building Commission. Thank you for your time this morning. I will briefly talk about our operating budget request as well as our capital budget request for 2019 and highlight some of the fun projects that we have going on in our building. This is a shot of who we are and what we do, the Municipal Building Commission. We have a total staff of 59 FTE. And as we've discussed in the past, the agency was created in state statute in 1904, and we are charged with the exclusive care and control of the City Hall Courthouse building. We are to provide effective and efficient services to operate, maintain, and preserve this beautiful building. As part of the maintenance of the facility, that includes all the mechanical and electrical systems, as well as all of the elevators in the building. And in addition, it's the MBC that provides all the custodial, utility, building security, repair and maintenance. Your painters, plumbers, pipe fitters, those are all MBC staff. Councilmember Goodman and Mayor Fry serve on the MBC board, as well as Commissioner Jan Callison and Commissioner Peter McLaughlin from Hennepin County. So for 2019, our operating budget is $9.7 million, and the MBC participates in both the county and the city operating budget process. As a reminder, the operating budget is split 60% City of Minneapolis and 40% Hennepin County. We are coming forward with a 3.5% lower request than we had for 2018. And our request is within both city and county property tax targets. The city is approximately $5.5 million, and this county is about $3.7 million. That's the operating budget. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
So moving on to the capital budget. This is a description of all of the projects that the MBC have ongoing currently. And as you can see, we have a lot of different activity occurring. I'm going to talk about two of the safety improvements and the elevator modernization projects specifically because we have requests in 2019 for those two projects. But very quickly, life safety and mechanical, those are priorities 1 and 3 on your chart. Those two projects are combined together, and that's the work we do throughout the entire facility. Stage by stage. We have 4 stages remaining in the life safety and the mechanical project, and those 4 stages are all occupied by city staff. In addition, I hope you came through the basement area this morning. That was our finishing of the mechanical and life safety project for that stage work. And what we did is we completely sanded and repainted the basement floor. So we're thrilled with the results, and we hope to be finished with that basement project by the end of this year. I'm going to jump over to the elevator modernization project. That includes the 6 rotunda elevators and the 1 service elevator that's located on the east side of the building. We are moving forward with this project and hope to have bids on the street in January of 2019. We will be starting with elevators 3 and 4 in the rotunda, which are the elevators closest to your offices. And so that project is ongoing. Oops. The next area that we have a request is the safety improvement non-stage work areas. And I know that Mike Ablin already addressed this with you. This again is mechanical and life safety upgrades in the building that are not in occupied areas. This project is designated for common spaces, such as the rotunda, the lobbies, and the attic. One of the pieces to this project is that we will be installing smoke barrier doors on all floors 1 through 3 that will encapsulate the rotunda area and have a separation between the office suites and the rotunda facility itself. Another interesting piece to this project is installing sprinklers in the attic of our building. So I'm going to jump back to this slide and briefly touch again on the exterior maintenance project, which is priority number 4. We have a current balance and we're moving forward, and we'll have bids out in early 2019. And council members, what this project involves is a comprehensive review and repair of all exterior parts to the facility. So that includes air infiltration, water infiltration, roof assessments, and drainage. And where I'm heading with this is that mid next year, you will start to see scaffolding that will be installed on the exterior sides of the building. Additional information will become available as we get closer to that, but I'd just like to take this opportunity to tell you about that now, that will be coming. In addition, the critical power project, which is actually the last project listed on our spreadsheet, it's fully funded and it has started. We are upgrading the aging and undersized emergency power systems located in our building. We're deciding what emergency power really needs to be on a generator and what size generator we actually need for this facility. A special issue with this project is you will soon see a generator located on the 4th Avenue side of the building, just very close to where the sheriff's office accesses their garage on 4th Avenue. The generator will be there for 4 to 6 months and will be used to power our systems during the course of this project. Just real briefly, again, the MBC's role is to provide a safe and effective building and work environment for staff and members of the public. Over 1,700 people enter the building on a daily basis. We are the first point of contact. We treat that very seriously, whether it's staff, employees, or members of the public. We're open and accessible. We're thrilled that we have a cafe now located on the ground floor of the building. We use multilingual signage, ADA compliant. We have gender neutral facilities. We are proud of the presentation that we give to members of the public when they enter into the building. Another note is that we soon will be completing the shower and changing facilities in the basement area, which also includes bicycle storage and lockers. So we hope to roll that program out in March of 2019. We are always available to give special tours. We do give a monthly tour that we typically have anywhere from 10 to 35 attendees on the tour. Again, you've heard me say this multiple times, we love to show off this building. So if you have an event that you have members of the public into your offices, give us a call. We'd love to give them a tour. And then as usual, we have the catering and events program as well. We're excited, we're expanding that program a little bit more. We have now an agreement with an exclusive caterer who will do more work at recruiting events for the facility. So we've already seen an uptick in the number of events that are booked in our facility. So we're pleased about that. Again, all revenue earned from those events goes into the Historic Preservation Fund, which is used obviously to fund historic preservation projects in the building. So those are all the notes that I've prepared, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any questions or comments in the queue. So, yes, I do. Councilmember Cunningham.
Sorry, I have a lot of papers and I was shuffling through them. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I do want to just say that downstairs looks so nice. I got to walk in today and was really excited to see that. So thank you for your team's hard work on that. I was hoping that you could give maybe a little bit more of an overview of the safety improvements. Will that include more safety measures in order, because like in comparison to St. Paul, they have quite an involved security system to be able to go into their building. So I'm just curious what you think of that and how that fits into the work that's planned.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Cunningham, Chair Palmisano. The safety improvements specifically don't address any type of detection or intervention at any of the entry points in our building, Councilmember. We have over 15 entrances into the City Hall Courthouse building. We are aware of that issue, that we need to keep a constant dialogue about that issue as far as entry points into the facility. This project, the safety component is the smoke barrier doors that I referenced that will be located on each door. As a part of that, there's a dual usage for those doors. They are smoke rated, smoke barrier doors, but they can also be used in the need of a security incident as well. At this point, we have the dialogue with the MBC board on safety and security in the building, and MBC staff is the security staff for the facility as well. And so we're always available for further conversation and further policy development on those issues as well.
Of course, thank you. And I just want to also say that you've got some great folks on staff who do security. I love those folks, always joking around with them. They remember me. So always really enjoy that. So you got a really great team.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Minneapolis Park and Rec Board. And I believe giving that presentation is Interim Superintendent Mary Merrow. Welcome. You know, the Park Board is a department of the city, albeit with special district status, but we're very closely tied together in part due to our shared capital budget. So decisions we make greatly influences that shared capital budget. And especially we have shared constituencies. So we're always looking to improve on that. So welcome, Mary Merrill.
Good morning, Chair Palmisano. I'm sorry,
okay.
Palmisano, and all of you council members. I'm truly honored to be here this morning, still this morning, and privileged to again serve you and the citizens of Minneapolis, the Park and Recreation Board, as superintendent for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. My motto has always been playing for life. That in our play, we provide fun and connections with the places, programs, and services that bring a high quality of life to our city. We serve the people of Minneapolis, and we all have a shared responsibility to ensure that our parks are really for everyone, and that absolutely no one gets left behind. This year, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board was named #1 park system in the nation for the 6th year in a row by the Trust for Public Land. Also, for the 6th year and 3rd year in a row, We were recognized as a finalist for the National Recreation and Park Association Gold Medal Award for Excellence in Park and Recreation Management. It is because of this legacy, our inheritance, the vision and commitment of those who went before us, and to all of you who are committed to the Minneapolis Park and Recreation System today, that we have received these prestigious honors and recognition. It is a tribute to the dedication and the hard work of the city, park commissioners, staff, and community throughout our 135-year history. These honors truly belong to all of us for the important work we do to improve park access and to provide critical services and programs. Budget process. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board began the 2019 budget process with retreats held in May and June. During the retreats, I shared factors that impact our 5-year financial outlook. I also shared that while our 20-year Neighborhood Park Plan, MPP 20, has begun to address neighborhood park infrastructure, significant gaps remain in the delivery of recreation programs and services. Based on board feedback, I have begun discussions with the city to support the current service level budget and increase the investment to enhance recreation program services focused on youth with a maximum property tax levy increase of 8.0% for 2019. Between June and August, I, along with my executive team and board president, met with the mayor and various city council members to discuss this proposal. Mayor Fry stated then that working together should not be the exception to the rule. It would be absolutely our standard. And on August 15th, he supported our current service level budget with an additional investment in our city's youth, with a recommended park board maximum tax levy of 5.53%. Included in this levy was an additional $150,000 to support the wraparound full-service community school park model. He also stated that he would work closely with us in the coming days to look for additional ways to support our city's youth. After continued conversations with the mayor on September 12th, the board approved a resolution requesting the Board of Estimate and Taxation set the maximum property tax levy at an increase of 5.7%, which included an additional $100,000 for youth services. I would like to personally thank the mayor, Council Member Bender, Council Member Wasani, for their support, which resulted in the BET approving the 5.7% maximum tax levy increase for the park board, including the $250,000 down payment on youth investment. I presented my recommended 2019 budget to the park board last Wednesday evening. During November and December, the board will consider the budget and public comment will be received. The annual budget will then be adopted in December. My recommended budget includes the 5.7% maximum property tax levy increase. That is a 5.8% property tax levy increase for the general fund operations and a 3% property tax levy increase for the tree preservation and reforestation levy to address the emerald ash borer and tree loss due to storms. This budget maintains the current service level of operations and utilizes the $250,000 down payment on youth investment for piloting the wraparound full-service school park model and expanding teen employment opportunities through our Teen Teamworks youth employment program. This budget also includes the third year of MPP 20 and continues to integrate criteria-based systems and the use of the racial equity lens for budget allocations and decisions. I also consider the direction received from the board along with input, recommendation, and requests from staff. So this morning, I am proud to present to you my recommended 2019 budget. The budget is the blueprint of what we are going to do. It takes the vision of the board and puts it into action. This budget focuses on responsive service delivery, racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and continues to respond to urban tree canopy threats through a special tax levy. The recommended budget is aligned with and supports the board's approved 2007 through 2020 comprehensive plan. The recommended budget also supports the 2018 through 2022 strategic direction adopted by the board on April 18th that will guide our system operations and initiatives through 2022 through the identification of 4 priorities. Invest in youth. Number 1, invest in youth. Be financially sustainable, protect the environment, and engage the community's power. Strategic Direction A, invest in youth. Since my return, I have consistently heard from the community, from Park Board commissioners, from the mayor, from city council members and legislators that there is a critical need in our city for enhanced youth programs and services and youth violence prevention strategies. This investment over the last 10 years in youth-serving organizations, changing city demographics, and an increase in youth violence have all changed and played a role in creating this critical need. The Park Board is uniquely positioned to address this urgent need with its neighborhood parks located within a 10-minute walk of most citizens. However, the economic downturn greatly impacted our ability to deliver youth services, and while MPP 20 addresses neighborhood park infrastructure, it does not address the needs of recreation program services, or what I call the people side of parks. Through the setting of the Park Board maximum property tax levy on an ongoing reinvestment in youth services of $250,000, this has begun to be established. The recommended budget includes this down payment, the $250,000 reinvestment in youth, and provides funding for, of course, as I said, the piloting, the wraparound full-service community school park models, something that we had done in the past. We had a number of what we used to call joint school park social service agencies, and this is the 21st century version of that, which goes a little bit further in terms of its inclusion of services that we want to provide at a centralized location to community. This budget also includes an increase in youth employment through Teen Teamworks. It also includes full funding for one conservation corps crew and support for the Run and Shoot Basketball League. Strategic Direction B. We remain committed to establishing long-term financial sustainability in operations, rehabilitation, and capital infrastructure for all operations. Although great strides have been made through the organizational initiatives and MPP 20, which of course we want to thank again the City Council and the Mayor for supporting that. Significant funding gaps do still remain in recreation service delivery, the regional park system, and enterprise operations. We are committed to addressing these financial challenges. And this budget focuses on balancing the need to maintain our existing facilities and programs with the importance of offering improved and new programs and services. The budget continues to improve the financial condition of the enterprise fund while also maintaining funding for the Parkland Acquisition Fund and Operations Facilities Rehabilitation Fund.
Ms. Merrill, I wanted just to stop. If you want, we can reserve all questions until the end, but there is a question
Okay.
on the last slide if you want to pause or if you'd like us to wait till the end. Okay. It's actually just for me. In regards to financial sustainability or stability over time,
Yes.
I'm curious about your fee setting process because we as a council took a vote earlier this year to increase some of our business license fees and a lot of other fees out of recognition that property taxes were disproportionately funding services that primarily benefit very few individuals. And I'm just curious, has the MPRB done any work around fees, or are you planning on that in the future?
We absolutely are planning on that. I don't know whether Julie would probably present that information. We hadn't planned on presenting actually the enterprise, but we have presented the enterprise to the park board, and we are planning on making improvements in regard to the changes in fees and some of our structuring of our operations in the enterprise. So Julie, if you want to respond.
I think that's enough information
Okay.
for now.
Okay, cool.
We just wanted,
Make sure we
it's
would.
nice to know that it's happening.
It is happening, definitely. Okay, protect the environment. Strategic Direction C. The Park Board mission states that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board shall permanently preserve, protect, maintain, improve, and enhance its natural resources, parkland, and recreational opportunities for current and future generations. Our comprehensive plan and the board's 2018 through 2022 strategic direction support the mission and commits to strategic and focused efforts to enhance open spaces and natural areas and management, to decrease our carbon footprint, increase use of electric vehicles, and continue to reduce pesticide use. Maybe eliminate pesticide use. I know that's the direction the board is going. This budget supports these efforts by including a community garden position and a forestry outreach position. This budget also supports the development of a comprehensive energy action plan, implementation of the CARP management plan for Lake Nokomis, creation of interactive exhibits at the Croning Interpretive Center, and use of a racial equity lens in tree planting and a review of our fleet vehicles. Strategic Direction D, engage community's power. We serve the community and the people of Minneapolis, so it is paramount to our success that we build upon the strong and unique connections that our communities have to caring for this beloved park system. As we continue along our path of being an inclusive park agency, it is important to recognize and engage all community members to create a sense of belonging, ownership, and power. Important work continues throughout the organization, including implementation of the Racial Equity Action Plan, the development of a police advisory council, the development of an urban agricultural plan and community garden policy, the revision of the community engagement policy. We are currently hosting park police learning sessions where we have begun the very important conversation around park police service levels and defining a common vision for park police. Also, for the first time in our history, we have invited the public to guide the qualities desirable in our next superintendent, soon to be, and enlisted a group of community members to help us assist us in narrowing the applications. This budget supports these efforts through the development of the next comprehensive plan, continuation of the racial equity and inclusion work, development of a language access plan, creation of a citywide resident survey, enhanced staffing for community events, and funding for community-led Juneteenth celebration, among other major changes. Finally, I want to thank all of you, your past and current and future, for your past, your current, and future support of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. My roots run deep with the city and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, and it has been my past and current experience that the city council members, park board commissioners, and employees are some of the hardest working people, each with a deep devotion to this incredible system in this wonderful city. So I'm going to now turn the presentation over to Director Wiseman, who will walk you through the superintendent's recommended 2019 budget book. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Merrill. I did have a quick question. You mentioned the comprehensive plan, and that's the Park Board's comprehensive plan. I wanted to be clear on that. But Can you tell us when does that start, and does it flow from whatever we as a city do with our Minneapolis 2040 comprehensive plan?
I'm sure that we'll be looking at, as we move toward our current comprehensive plan ends on 2020. And as we look forward to creating the next comprehensive plan for the Park Board, certainly we will be looking at the city's comprehensive plan as well.
That's an important point of coordination. And then is that comprehensive plan also submitted to Met Council, or is it submitted to the city, or can you tell us where it goes?
Well, it'll go a number of places. Michael? I'm sure it will go to the metropolitan parks. I'm sure it will go to the city and to all of the citizens. But Michael, you want to add?
Chair Palmisano, we'll be bringing it forward to, as Superintendent Merrill is suggesting, to several different agencies. We have to make sure it aligns with the Metropolitan Council's Parks and Open Space policy plan. So we'll be bringing it forward to a number of different agencies.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Sorry, that was Michael Schroeder, our Assistant Superintendent for Planning.
Great.
Okay. Julie?
Good morning, Chair Palmisano and council members. I'm Julie Wiseman. I'm the Finance Director for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. You all received in advance a copy of the Superintendent's recommended 2019 budget. My slides just follow the budget book through each section of the budget. So the first part of the budget book is the budget message, which the superintendent just presented to you this morning, as well as the budget highlights. So if you're interested in detail of what was in and what was taken out of the individual divisions and departments, that information is in this section. The next section of the budget book is the 2014 to 2018 strategic direction that our board adopted on April 18th of this year that provided the direction for this budget process. The next section of the budget book is the background information, and it just contains the org chart and some fund information and definitions of acronyms. Then we get into the financial part of the budget book with the property taxes and local government aid. And again, this budget is utilizing the maximum property tax levy increase of 5.7%. That's $65.7 million. The Park Board is just a little bit below 19% of the total city tax. For local government aid, this budget estimates a $9.3 million for local government aid. And again, you can see that it has stabilized, but it's still well below what we used to receive from the state. The next section of the budget book is the general fund. And you'll see that our general fund is 75% supported by property taxes. So Chair Palmisano, when you were talking about fees, our general fund, if you envision our parks, it's really about access and free access to our open spaces and even within our community centers. And there's a lot of conversation with this board about how fees impact the usage of our parks. And so we are really looking at, when we're talking about financial sustainability in the general fund, we're looking at scholarship programs, other things that would improve the access and the ability for the residents. The expenditures, we are just under 70% wages and fringe. The increase in wages and fringe of 5.1% is largely driven by the minimum wage increase, contracts that were settled, especially the Federation contract, and then also the increase for Teen Works through the down payment in youth investment. The increase on the operating side is inflationary, and also the wraparound school model we budgeted in the operating side. This is a pilot program, so once the pilot program is decided and how it will be staffed, there will be a shift in the budget. But at this point, we are budgeting on the operating side. Expenditures by division. Again, the superintendent's office, which includes the Park Police Department, has a larger increase, and that is largely due to the Federation contract that settled in late 2017, so it wasn't included in the 2018 budget for us, so we're catching up in 2019. And then the Recreation Division has a 6.4% increase, and again, that's the Teen Works and the wraparound schools. The next section of the budget book is our special revenue funds, and this is where the tree preservation and reforestation special levy is housed. This is an 8-year program, and 2019 is year 5 of that 8-year program. And then we also have our park grant and dedicated revenues. So those are non-capital grants that we receive. It also is where we hold the park dedication money and our operations and maintenance lottery proceeds that we receive from the state until those items are programmed out into the capital program. The enterprise fund is the next section of the budget book. You'll see on the fee side, we're looking at fee increases in all of our operations in the enterprise fund. And we're also, parking lots and meters is showing a larger increase, as with this budget, we are going to be increasing some rates, adding some new parking lots and meters into our system. And then on the expenditure side, the concession, we are doing a shift in concession maintenance and direct charging maintenance to the concessionaires. So that's what that increases for wages and fringe. And then there's a decrease in operating as we look at the viability of our golf operations and working on improving the financial status of our golf operations. So this shows our operating income by unit in the enterprise fund. And you'll see that the customer service area is really the large driver with the biggest net incomes, with parking, use and event permitting, and vendor concessions. And then the sculpture garden is still in the enterprise fund, as we are still working to make that micro enterprise and hope to bring that into a profit-making situation. And then you'll see that the loss for golf is estimated at $500,000 in 2019 as we continue to look at the viability and future of golf within our organization. The net profit for the year, because the enterprise fund is not property tax supported, we pay debt out of our enterprise fund. And then we have the reflection of the MRF payment with that burden being returned to the City and Park Board. Our enterprise fund bears a burden. Our general fund is included in the city's pension levy, so we're not impacted in our general fund for that. And then for improvements, the three major improvements that are on plan for 2019 is the parade parking lot, which is in dire need, the section that's between the football fields and baseball fields. So that will be reconstructed in 2019. We're also constructing a new small parking lot at Minnehaha Falls Regional Park. And then our continued work with the master planning and engineering for Hiawatha Golf. Our internal service funds, we have three: information technology services, our self-insurance fund, and our equipment fleet. And you'll see in our equipment fleet that we're recommending to use some reserves for equipment purchases, and that's just due to the fact that the state contract was held for so long, and we need to catch up on equipment purchases that were supposed to be made in 2017 and 2018. On the capital project side, we have our capital projects in two categories: our neighborhood parks funding and our regional parks funding. So you'll see that on the neighborhood parks funding, it includes the MPP 20 of $10.5 million, which is the $2.5 million that predated MPP 20, and the $8 million that came in with MPP 20. With this, we do use the equity criteria for neighborhood parks, and this budget supports parks ranked through number 44. I will also mention on the regional side that the 2019 to 2024 CIP includes $5 million of the $6 million needed for the Upper Harbor Terminal match. So we're excited to have that identified and programmed in. And then it includes park dedication. Park dedication funding has been included the last couple of years, but you'll see the most significant amounts now starting to show up, where $3.24 million of park dedication dollars are allocated to 21 parks in 2019 and 2020. One of the final sections of the budget book is our personnel summary. With this budget, we are recommending a full-time workforce of 571 employees. And then just finally, I will talk just a little bit about racial equity and the budget process. Again, our major accomplishments through NPP 20 and then even beyond and past NPP 20 is that our CIP program is the first in the nation to use a criteria-based, data-driven information in allocating our capital funds. And we also have developed a criteria-based, data-driven matrix that allocates out the recreation center funding. And then throughout the whole budget process, we have demonstrated our racial equity work through our Department 2019 goals, as well as our 2019 budget adjustments. So if there's any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Wiseman or Ms. Merrill? I'm not seeing any. I want to thank you for this presentation. Are you through with all of the pieces?
I forgot to mention that I did pass this out. Yep. This is the large CIP that includes all the changes from last year to this year, so that you can follow project by project. Okay. The way that this is color coded is that do you want to come up, Mike? So I believe that.
Come on.
The green, yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Schroeder.
Committee members, we color coded to help people understand where the dollars are coming from. And because we've carried forward promises from previous CIPs before MPP 20 was in place, we have noted those, and those are colored or tagged in yellow. where we have brought in MPP 20 money. Those are kind of in a tealish or blue color, and where we combine them together to create a project, it's coded in green. Eventually, there will be no more yellow in this because we will have satisfied all of the CIP commitments we've made previously. And as Julie mentioned before, we are working very hard to bring the accumulated park dedication dollars by neighborhood back into parks as they are master planned through our service area master plans.
Mr. Schroeder, there's quite a bit of previous CIP. Any reasons for that?
It's, Chair Palmisano, it's just those projects that we have committed to in previous CIPs, I think going back to before MPP 20 was implemented, so that would be 2016. And so those are projects that we have committed to the community that we would implement before we put the metrics in place that align projects under NPP 20.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham.
Yes, would it be possible to get the clarification about what the peach color boxes are?
Chair Palmisano, Member Cunningham, I believe those are places where we've had to make some shifting, and I think they're tied to another page that's in the back of this, where we have done some work to reinsert Elliott Park. For some reason last year, we went through this entire process and didn't notice that Elliott Park wasn't included in its proper place. It is inserted this year, and this is the first year that it would have gotten funding. So we needed to make a few other adjustments so that people would understand how Elliott Park made it back into the CIP.
Great. And I did have one more question. I'm done with the color coding, so thank you. I wanted to get some clarification. I'm sorry, this is about a specific park, but we have a pretty big issue with Weber Park with the new natural pool. We're just having an issue with it staying open, and so that was a pretty big investment. So I'm curious as to how are we going to be able to make that more accessible and consistent? When can we expect for that to happen? Just curious.
Yeah, it is a big issue, and we're very, very concerned. And I've asked Assistant Superintendent Barrick, who's been working on this diligently, and we'll be doing some additional work this fall to try to bring this really state-of-the-art, new kind of technology in terms of our pools to the forefront. But we certainly have concern, as you've identified.
Thank you. Chair Palmisano, Member Cunningham. Yes, we share your concern at Weber Pool. We've been working since we closed the pool for the season. We've been working to rehab the regeneration pond, which will consist of replacing the top about 4 to 6 inches of soil in a portion of the pond. We have a theory that that's one of our challenges, getting the proper filtration. And so we're going to rehab that. That work could be happening this week or next week. We already have a contractor on to do that. And then from there, there's 2 other pieces that we are working to get in place before next season, and that is duct deterrent. So we are looking at laser duct deterrent as a means. They use that at the airport. Something that would cover that whole area and help us to keep the ducks out. We're also looking at working with the USDA Fish and Wildlife for assistance there. And then we have been talking to the folks in Canada, Edmonton in particular, who just recently opened their a natural swimming pool as well, and they use the filtration, a backup filtration system. So we're doing research now on UV filtration or other filtration methods that would allow us to maintain it as a natural swimming pool, but give us a backup in the event that the bacteria levels exceed the thresholds. So
give a backup and if the ducks make it to the water, sort of, yes.
Exactly.
I know the ducks have been the big issue with keeping it balanced and accessible to the public. So I just wanted to check in because that was literally a call that I got probably every other day, and so over the summer. So I just wanted to check in and make sure that we were, I know you all have been working on it, but just kind of looking forward to the future, what the plan was to be able to address that.
And if you promise it won't urinate.
Right. Bring the dog. Okay, I was going to ask Assistant Superintendent Cox also to come and talk a little bit about some of the remedies that we tried to do with making sure that people had access to some kind of swimming pool or water this summer. So if you'd like to share your transportation.
Thank you, Superintendent, Chair Palmisano, and council members. Some of the things that we've done to ensure that people have access to swimming pools or features when Weber was down was providing free entrance coupons to North Commons or to Lupien, our two other swimming pools that are that are fee-based. But we didn't want people to just send people there for free from a free facility and then ask them to pay at the other facilities. So on the days that the pool was closed for environmental reasons, we then give them the opportunity to go to the other places at no cost to the family. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions about that. Ms. Murrow, we so appreciate your steady guidance as interim superintendent and in working with you this past year. I hope there's more opportunities for coordination and collaboration. I know my colleagues, well, many of them had to leave, we're beyond our time here, have expressed that desire and have found great value in some of the ways that you've connected with us and that your staff have connected with us this year. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We look forward, or they look forward to continuing the work with the City Council. We really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yep. And with that, that concludes our agenda for today. We don't
and I forgot to mention
Commissioner
Park
Colgill
Commissioner Colgill
is here in the
here.
audience. I should have noted that myself, as well as Ms. Ringgold. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, and we stand adjourned.